Okay, let's get it. So a few days ago, I finished the full draft, and now I'm just going through iteration after iteration of edits. I've been following ChatGPT is actually popping off with some of these edits. First of all, it's generating like, I think this is a list of 70 some edits, and it's specifically, this run is specifically looking at ways in which I might be overstating something. So I want to make sure that I don't, in this iteration of edits, I want to make sure that I'm not saying anything that's overly inappropriate. So what have I done? Did I do this? Yes. But I've not done this. Is already biased. Already biased. Nope. Biased? Towards? Biased? Nope. Fully hit your retina. Okay. Your brain has already drawn them before the photons fully hit your retina. This was in the discussion of, okay, predictive processing, the occlusion studies. I see. So the replacement, oh, this is, I was looking at the, okay, your brain is already biased towards the expected pattern before the sensory evidence has fully been processed. Ooh. Okay. For number 27, you help me understand why we would make a change here. My understanding is that the top-down signal is effectively predicting the pattern, not just priming the recognition of it. Which once again puts all the highlights the bottom up. Okay, I wonder if I should be like top right here. Whoa, that up is so big. Whoa. Is that about the same size? Okay. Yeah, let's do that so that we could actually see my cursor. I wonder if I could also do this right now, real quick. What do we need? We need a Steam Deck. Stream Deck. Oh, I wish I had a Steam Deck. Now, can we get like a OBS? What's this going to be? Browse source, CPU, drop frames. What if I just did scene here? What do we get? Next scene, previous scene, set scene selection, scene switcher. And then this is going to be a scene. Now, wait, what is scene transition going to be? Transition, cut, fade, duration. What does that mean, though? What are we cutting to? I don't understand. Or do we set... Oh, we set the scene transition so that now it's going to... Yeah, now okay, now it's not a fade anymore. I want it to be a fade, and now it's going to be a fade. Okay. This is not what we want. We want a scene switcher, maybe? What does the scene switcher do? Scene. No, this just does one scene as well. So let's just do this. Top, bottom. Boom. Scene, up, scene, down. Title. Up, down, up, down. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. Okay, your understanding is basically right in predictive coding. The top-down signal is not merely a later recognition label. It can be modeled as a prediction of level sensory patterns. There's good evidence that expectations can change early visual cortical representations. They found that expectations can reduce overall V1 response amplitude while improving the decodability sharpness of the represented stimulus. Okay. And that's what it's referring to. That's what we're leveraging here. The reason I flagged the line is narrower. Before the photons fully hit your retina makes the claim sound temporary and physically literal in a way that is not right. Photons do not partly hit the retina over the relevant... Okay, I see. The fully. Before the photons... What if I just said even... hit your retina? The photons do not partly hit the retina over the relevant time scale such that the brain draws the keys before the visual signal exists. What happens is more like this. Before the sensory evidence has been fully processed, the brain may already be biasing early visual areas toward the expected pattern. Okay, so I was hoping for something more akin to this. Oh man. I understand why you want that version. It's vivid, blah, 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 but I would not use that. That line crosses from metaphor into a likely misleading physical claim. I see. The brain can prepare, bias, or pre-activate an expected perceptual pattern before the relevant input is fully processed, but it does not visually draw the keys before any retinal signal arrives in the ordinary case. Okay, here's what I was... Okay. Wait, we're in ChatGPT land. We could just do this. My understanding of neural simulation is that maybe this actually only works with dot dot dot, and maybe this only applies to interoceptive signals. When the brain needs to make some change in the body, it will do so, but it will also predict those changes such that it will react to what it expects to be happening prior to even getting those more direct signals from the body that it affected. So I was imagining similarly, if there was some sign that something would be the case, like you expect something visually, your brain would predict that visual stimuli before the stimuli even hits your retina. Okay. This is what I was imagining here. All right, it's conceptually good, but there's a crucial difference between interoceptive allostatic prediction and visual prediction. In allostasis, yes, the brain can issue regulatory changes and also predict their incoming bodily consequences before slow interoceptive feedback arrives. Okay, Sterling's allostasis model defines efficient regulation as anticipating needs and preparing to satisfy them before they arise. Man, I keep forgetting that it's warm out and I need to change my temperature. It's getting hot. Okay, that is central to allostasis, right? For vision, something similar can happen, but the wording has to be different. The brain can generate pre-stimulus sensory templates or expectation-driven patterns in visual cortex before the expected stimulus arrives. Studies on visual expectation do support the idea that prior expectations can bias sensory representations before stimulus onset. There's also evidence for anticipatory top-down processing and perceptual template reinstatement before visual input appears. Okay. So your intuition is not wrong. The brain can, in some cases, pre-activate or simulate expected visual patterns before the relevant visual stimulus hits the retina. The issue is just the phrase before the photons even hit your retina. That sounds like the brain is already perceiving the specific keys before the causal visual evidence exists. Okay. My understanding is if the brain expects keys to be in a specific location, then it could actually see the keys before the photons hit the retina. Especially if, for instance, there is like a shadow there and maybe the keys aren't even there, but some other stimuli has made it so that you do see keys even though those keys aren't actually there. Now, in that case, it would be, you know, how it's describing it, how you interpret photons that might not necessarily be the keys. Overall, I just don't want to make it seem like we're talking about the brain as if it needs to take in this stimuli and then figure out what the stimuli actually holds. All right, let's run with that. All right, defensible. Your brain may already be sketching the expected pattern before the visual evidence arrives to confirm or correct it. So if you expect your keys to be on the table, your brain, like we could say, your brain may already, I don't know, have already drawn them in some sense. Okay, but there are two different claims here, and they need different wording. Claim 1, expectation can pre-activate visual patterns. Claim 2, the brain can see the keys before the photons hit the retina. All right. If you expect keys in location, your brain may already be preparing a sensory template before the relevant visual evidence arrives. Studies on prior expectation describe the brain as generating pre-stimulus sensory templates and visual cortex to preempt expected inputs. Other work has found expectation-related stimulus-specific activity in V1. So if you expect your keys on the table, your brain may already be sketching the visual patterns it expects to find. Okay. The brain can pre-activate a keys-like pattern. It can bias perception towards keys. It can even, under ambiguous input, make you experience keys that are not actually there. But saying it sees the keys before photons. Did I say see? Has already drawn them. Okay. So is there a happy medium here? I think the issue is that when I say has already drawn them, that makes it seem like the, I should say, that might be misinterpreted as how do I go about this? My understanding is your brain would literally draw keys, but it's not necessarily what the stimuli is going to then tell you. As seeing keys, what should I say? I think the issue is that when I say has already drawn them, people could interpret that to mean that you somehow see something that is actually there before the stimuli gets to your vision, and I'm trying to make it clear that it's not like you are seeing what is actually there, whatever that means, but that your brain is going to see keys initially, and then what transpires, I believe, is a rapid dynamic A rapid, it's more like a setting into an equilibrium. What's the word here? I feel like I need to know more about like dynamical systems. Dynamic process where the expectation becomes reined in by what the stimuli actually, I don't want to say that, what the stimuli suggests, leading to something like an equilibrium that we intuit as seeing the keys. However, my understanding is that simply saying that the brain is getting ready some template would be inappropriate. It makes it seem like it's only using these top-down signals to then filter what it receives, when in reality, my understanding is the brain will actually see something that is potentially not there for that split second before prediction error tells it that it's either there or not. And that affects the predictions, and it affects what you end up consciously experiencing. All right, we gotta get this figured out. All right, the phrase you want is not template and not already drawn them before the photons. It's something like the brain makes a first perceptual wager. I'd use this. If you expect your keys on the table, your brain is not waiting for the light to explain itself. It makes a first perceptual wager, sketching the keys it expects to find. Okay. I should just ask though, am I on the money there? Am I on target here? Because this is kind of important. All right, you are on target, but the exact phrase needs to separate three things that your intuition is blending together. Pre-activation, prediction. Before the stimulus arrives, the brain can already prepare keys like sensory pattern. Ambiguous perception. Once some visual input arrives, shadow, glint, contour, contrast, that input may be interpreted as keys because the prior is already... Okay. And then what you consciously experience is the rapid stabilized result. What I'm saying is a little stronger than what you have here. My understanding is that if your prediction is salient enough, it could become conscious before there is any feedback from actual sensory stimuli. Now, granted, this is unnoticeable given how quick this will happen, but it could make you see someone standing there when it's really just a blanket draped over a chair. Consciously see. Okay. You are on target if we define the claim carefully. What you are describing is real. A sufficiently strong salient prior can shape perception so aggressively that you may briefly experience an expected object in ambiguous input. The person standing there that turns out to be a blanket on a chair. Predictive accounts of hallucination often describe hallucinations as perceptions driven by overly strong or overly precise priors, and experimental work supports the idea that strong priors can induce hallucination-like perceptions even in healthy subjects. Right, my example was terrible because it still isn't the it's still seeing some stimuli that would make you see that or have that experience. So this is like a really delicate thing to say. But I think this is good to change because I think someone like colloquially, the layperson's going to see like has already drawn them to mean something like you've got the direct vision of it. If you expect your keys to be on the table, your brain, yeah, what's going to be, brain is not waiting for the photons to announce keys. It may already be opposing. Okay, so even more incredibly, neuroimaging shows that expected signals actually show up sharper in a visual in the visual cortex. Top-down expectation of the word actually alters the early stages of visual processing, enhancing the perception before the brain even finished processing the light. If you expect your keys to be on the table, yeah, so it doesn't even have to be this strong. Your brain will be primed to see them. I wanted to go through that just for my own sake, but we could have probably done that pretty quickly. How about something as simple as this? Primed may sound weaker than what you mean, like the brain is merely, okay, right? Your brain will be biased towards seeing them. Your brain will already be biased towards seeing them there. Primed versus biased. Nah, this is fine. This is totally fine. I know I was going for a stronger view, but I think for this paragraph, this is fine. All right, what was that? That was 27? Let's keep it going. 28. Specific. All right. Severity serious. Dun, dun, dun. Specific neurons encode the brain's expectations. Outer layers subtracting, broadcasting only, prediction error. Laminar. Nope. Predictive coding is an active hypothesis with evidence but not settled. Modern neuroanatomy has mapped exactly how. I see. Exactly how. Specific neurons encode the... Okay. So replacing some influential laminar models propose... Oh, okay, so this is like literally right next to this. Deep within the cortex, specific neurons encode the brain's expectations and send predictions backward and downward through the hierarchy. Then neurons in the outer layers of the cortex act as comparators, taking the incoming sensory data, subtracting the deep layers prediction, and broadcasting only the resulting prediction error forward and upward. Though the mapping is still debated. Okay, could we, for number 28, could we both amend this to be more appropriate and also make this slightly more accessible? And ideally, we don't say something like, though the mapping is still debated. I don't know how large ChatGPT's context window is. Okay, the key is to swap has mapped exactly to has begun to reveal a possible route. Modern neuroanatomy has begun to reveal how this kind of information flow could be implemented in the cortex. Broadly speaking, deeper cortical layers are well positioned to send predictions backward and downward through the hierarchy, while more superficial layers are, is there a better word than superficial for like a lay person? Like shallower layers? Outer layers are well positioned to carry forward the mismatch between what was expected and what actually arrived. In this picture, The cortex is not just passing signals upwards. Okay. This picture, the cortex is not just passing signals upwards, it is constantly comparing expectations against input and forwarding what remains unresolved. All right, so let's just do this. Is it fine to use outer instead of superficial? Brain. Okay, including its folded. Okay. Outer is fine for a lay audience, and is more accessible. In neuroscience, superficial cortical layers is the standard term, but outer layers is understandable and basically acceptable in a video essay. While more outer layers, okay. While the more superficial outer layers, that's kind of nice. Okay. We get best of both worlds. Okay, let's go back. 29. Global neuronal workspace explains that information. Okay, this is an obvious one. Here we go. Which explains, that suggests, that purports. Also, salience network sounds the alarm is the metaphor that could imply a clean mechanism. Explicitly a hypothesis, right. This fits. According to which purports that, which claims that information becomes, okay, when it's amplified. So when local unconscious processing fails to resolve a significant prediction error, the salience network so in this view, when localized unconscious processing fails to resolve a significant prediction error, the salience network basically sounds an alarm. For number 29, how about this? All right, and I think I'm gonna, when we get to like an hour 15, I think I'm gonna start reading, just so that I'm not sure what we can. I'll probably ask, I don't know, Gemini or ChatGPT, like, what should I do during my read through? Like, what should I look out for? But I'm looking out for how readable it is. And yeah, so like the wording that I'm speaking, but also if there's anything we could get rid of, obviously, I would like to consider that. All right, the main fix is that you now say conscious access rather than just consciousness. That is the important distinction. I say conscious access? Oh, conscious access. I see. I would make 3 small changes. Use holds or proposes instead of claims. Hell yeah. Proposes that information. Say some information becomes conscious rather than information becomes conscious. Why? I think it's insinuated that some information is becoming conscious. It's not like all the information. that information becomes conscious when it is amplified and broadcast across distributed brain systems. I think that's fine. Global neuronal workspace is about access to specific contents, not consciousness as a substance. Right? Should I say as? Would number 2 be would number 2 here be fixed by slightly soften the salience network line so it does not sound like global neural workspace and salience network processing are the same theory, right? So in this view, when localized unconscious processing fails to resolve a significant prediction error, systems involved in salience and attention can effectively sound an alarm. Okay, that's fine. Still sounds universal, as though any information that gets amplified broadcast becomes conscious, or as though global neural workspace theory explains consciousness in general. My understanding... Oh, I see, okay. This is actually my usual take against... This is my argument against the discrete consciousness view. That even though the global neuronal workspace operates with a discrete... Yo, Energy Tantra, what's good? I have a question related to philosophy of math. Okay. I might not have a great answer, but we'll see. If the global workspace is operating on a theta frequency, then that might imply that we experience the world discretely, and I think it does imply that we can only, like at a phenomenological level, or a phenomenal level, we can only notice at that level of, or at that frequency. Like that's the fastest we could notice changes in conscious perception, given that that's a synchronization of many different parts of the brain affecting what you're conscious of. That would be noticeable. What I understand to be happening, though, is that it's not just like information gets entered into this global workspace, and that workspace is the consciousness. Consciousness is affected by a synchronization of many distributed brain systems. So, in theory, between those ignitions of synchronization, there could be changes in local networks that would affect your conscious perception, but without you noticing it. It would not be noticeable. Because to notice something requires the synchronization. Okay, do you agree with the constructivist or Cantorian view of multiple sizes of infinities? Oh, I don't know. Or I can't make a case on that. I just don't know enough about infinity. You'd probably have to go into like deep math to learn how to. Well, it's just, even if I asked AI about it, I would just make like an intuitive, I don't know, what would I say? I would just kind of give you whatever comes to my mind. Like I think you need to go into math, like you have to deeply read about about math and understand these theories before you can make a case about infinity. I think it would be akin to what you usually don't like me doing, which is just going based off of the AI. Like this is an instance where I cannot make a case on that, just because I am so out of the out of that space. Okay, which proposes that I see. How can we actually? Some information becomes conscious as it. How can we? Could we instead say something like, which proposes that information becomes conscious as it is synchronized across distributed brain systems? The central idea is not merely that information becomes conscious when brain systems synchronize. Synchronization could be part of the story, depending on the neural implementation, but the signature language is amplification, global availability, ignition, and broadcasting. Aren't all those words in the service of synchronization? It's not like there's a space that is the global workspace. Rather, this is describing a distribution of information that affects synchronized processing. Oh my gosh, we're always getting double hit with these now. Whoa. My understanding is constructivists argue that there can't be multiple sides of infinity since you can never construct infinity, so there can't be actual infinity in math because they believe that mathematical proofs have to be constructible, whereas my understanding is formalists and Platonists believe math doesn't have to be constructible, so there can be multiple. Yeah, I have no idea how to even. I don't even know if that's an important math topic. Like, is this just a philosophy of math topic, or is this something that mathematicians believe is actually important? Yo, time for trouble and make it double. Hell yeah. Welcome, welcome. It's a set theory question, but is it like a philosophy of set theory question, or is it like actually a important set theory problem that needs to be solved? We are good today. We are chilling. Okay, global workspace is describing a functional state of global availability, right? Not an inner theater, but I would still not make synchronization the main verb, because in that theory, the important thing is not merely the brain regions becoming synchronized. It's that a representation becomes stabilized, amplified, and made available. Okay. The intuition is right, but I'd phrase it this way. Which proposes that information becomes consciously accessible when it is amplified into a globally coordinated signal across distributed... Oh my gosh. Could we not just go with... becomes consciously accessible when it is amplified... into a globally coordinated signal. Could we not just do something like... Oh, this is great. This is what we want. which proposes that information becomes consciously accessible when it is amplified, synchronized, and made globally available across distributed brain systems. So, in this view, when localized unconscious processing fails to resolve a significant prediction error, systems involved in salience and attention can effectively sound an alarm. We need more hands to make sense of this. The unresolved signal is broadcast more widely, allowing the organism to coordinate around the anomaly. So now can we change this, though? Okay, can we now change this fragment to capture this sense of synchrony? Synchronous processing. Resolution. Whoa. Oh, but my understanding is mathematicians don't care about it particularly. How do they reach multiple infinities? Countable? I think infinity can be easily represented. Like, I think one, like, can't you do two infinities? Like, added together equals infinities. You could have as many infinities as you want added together to equal infinity. I think in that's actually useful in math in some cases. Countable infinity refers to sets that can be listed in a one-to-one correspondence with natural numbers, such as integers or fractions, where you can order every element. Uncountable infinity is strictly larger and includes real numbers and cannot be listed, as some numbers are always missed, like the dense continuous points on a line. Okay, I see. That, yeah, I guess that's a slightly different topic, because you could do the same thing that I just mentioned for both of those in their separate domains. Makes sense to me. Bigger infinites. These two infinities seem mathematically distinct. I think they would be mathematically distinct. I'm a decade removed from doing any math. Absolutely, same here. Yes, to capture synchronous global processing without sounding too technical, replace allowing the organism to coordinate around the anomaly to... Yes, beautiful. I probably could have done that myself, but, you know, I like the hand holding. All right, 29 maybe? 30, we're on 30. The brain literally, physically rewires. What do we have? A severity moderate. Rewires its generative model to minimize future prediction errors. Learning changes synaptic weights and model parameters, but literally rewires its generative model is rhetorically heavy and teleological. So we could just say that brain physically rewires. Is that too crazy? Brain physically updates the neural parameters that shape future predictions. Okay. For number 30, how about this? Man, that's a long. That's close, but I would avoid rewires its generative model. The issue is not physically. Oh, do we already have weights here? By changing the physical weighting of these. Okay. The brain physically updates. Okay, yeah, why don't I just say updates? That should be it. I shouldn't even go rewires here. It doesn't help us out. Since my understanding, you believe the meaning of a term is what can be constructed in a language game with inferences, you would be a constructivist who rejects actual multiple sizes of infinities. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This is like the most seditious? What is sedition? That's not what I'm going for, but this is the worst thing you could do to me. You could take my linguistic thing and then, you know, the whole point of trying to be really careful about the language is so that people can't do this. And what I say when I say this, I mean like taking something I say and then making an implication about other things that I would mean because it follows in your own understanding that would be an implication of it. But all right. I don't believe that the meaning of a term is like constructed. I'm not going to be like a constructivist in some sense. I'm not going to use the word constructed ever. And I only brought up the language game stuff as a metaphor. I'm not trying to say that what a word means is how it's used and stuff like that. I always like to go. Remember, I always like to go. Meaning is most fundamentally. Okay, I should say this. The way we can think about meaning is most fundamentally phenomenological. How we experience it, how it appears to us in our consciousness, how it affects the way we perceive the world. So I'm not going to say something as far as like linguistic games and blah blah blah. Remember, these things influenced me, but I'm not taking them and running with them. You would be a constructivist. So, and then even if I was a constructivist, let's just say I was a constructivist in terms of language, you couldn't just say I'm a constructivist in every single frame of constructivism. That would be inappropriate, or that would be, I would say it wouldn't be allowed. If someone's a constructivist for the brain, right? There is a constructivism for perception. That doesn't mean that they're constructivists in terms of infinities and math. Like, you can't just take constructivism and throw it to this other thing. Same with when like someone says that they're an idealist or something, or a physicalist. You have to. I always get on their case because that's ambiguous, but you wouldn't be able to take what they just said there and then say that they agree with all types of idealism or physicalism. You kind of have to ask them what. Perhaps you should ask them what they're actually like. What's the sub point? What is the more precise viewing that they have? Don't put infinities in his mouth. Just wanted to make that joke, not to be me. Part of the reason I don't identify with a religion is all these similar assumptions and projections that happen. Absolutely. That's the nice thing about being spiritual, right? Like, spiritual can mean anything, and no one's going to like fault you for being spiritual. It's got this like perfect connotation. It doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of the type of belief system you have, so you kind of get to enjoy that ambiguity. Okay. All right, that is better than literally physically rewires. I just make one small adjustment. The brain physically updates the neural machinery underlying its generative model. The neural architecture underlying its generative model is a theoretical construct. The brain does not literally contain a labeled object called the generative model, right? The brain physically updates its neural architecture to reduce... underlying its generative model. That's, yeah. Its generative model to minimize future prediction errors. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Very nice. All right. What was that? That was like 30 or something? Okay. Right here as well. Serious. This is the predictive processing thesis, not a settled conclusion. Predictive processing theories argue that much... Okay. It is okay, this complete unified picture. Well, okay, I'm not doing much. I'm not being too bad here. I'm putting this on the neuroscientists. Led many neuroscientists to a radical conclusion. This, yeah, what if I just said this? For number 31, what if I just more clearly put this on the neuroscientists. Because it attributes the claim rather than presenting it as settled fact. I would make one more change. Many neuroscientists with many predictive processing theorists or many researchers in this tradition. Why not many neuroscientists? Sounds broader than warranted. Neuroscience as a whole has not accepted this as a settled conclusion. Okay. This is something I do want to actually talk about here. Out of curiosity, because this is just my understanding, how crazy are you in neuroscience? How crazy do people view you? How crazy would other neuroscientists view someone in neuroscience that isn't acknowledging of the predictive processing framework in some way or another? It seems like the writing is on the wall, and now it just comes down to whether or not the predictive processing explanation is too inappropriate in some way. Okay, sorry for being presumptuous. So are you a mathematical I have no idea. I'm not sure. I would not, like, and it's not the type of thing that, like, if I were to read something real quick right now that I would be able to tell you. I don't think I should make a case on that. Like, I don't think it would make I wouldn't even take my own case seriously. Like, it's not that it's not something that I would find able to do. Or able to assert. But I'd separate 3 levels of non-acknowledgement. Okay, not crazy at all. A neuroscientist who said prediction is not relevant to perception, action, or brain function would sound badly out of date. But a neuroscientist who said, I accept that prediction is important, but I do not think the full predictive processing framework is the master theory of the brain, would not sound crazy at all. That is a normal, respectable position. And a neuroscientist who said predictive coding is useful in some circuits and tasks, but the brain probably uses many computational motifs, not one universal algorithm. The writing on the wall is a major organizing principle. Okay, my understanding is that prediction is pervasive across the cortical architecture. We see this in all L2 and L3 neurons. I think that's the case. It has now been demonstrated that computational simulations that follow these predictive processing paradigms seem to line up starkly with actual neural processing. What else? And of course, our understanding of allostasis gives a incredibly justifiable reason and rationale as to why the brain would be doing these things. Perhaps this is more of a philosophy of science type of question, but how does this not make it such that a neuroscientist who is simply discounting how integral this view of the brain seems to be How did I start this sentence? But how does this not make it such that a neuroscientist is discounting how integral this view of the brain seems to be? Would be out of date in some serious way? That's not a great question, but yo, Onion Helmet. Every time you need to give a source for a fact, put an image of an onion on the screen in front of an all black background and add in the soundbite. Yep. Very nice. You gotta send me the script at the end so I can cook you with Claude. Oh man. Nah, but I have been talking to AI about PPT. What is PPT? Predictive processing theory? PowerPoint? Ah, I see. What are your takeaways? Okay. When does a framework become so evidentially central that ignoring it is no longer intellectually current? I think your instinct is right, but the precise target should be a neuroscientist would be out of date if they ignored prediction, feedback, expectation, and error signaling as central motifs of cortical function, but not necessarily out of date if they resisted predictive processing as the single master theory of the whole brain. Right. Because that, I mean, at that point, it's like a semantic issue or like a, you know, you're in a different game. Okay, you're pointing to a genuine convergence. This might be worthwhile to actually read here. First, predictive processing fits the gross architecture of cortex. I really don't like this, like using cortex in this way, as if it's like a proper noun or something. Hierarchical organization, massive feedback, recurrent loops, and different laminar roles for ascending and descending signals. Reviews of predictive processing explicitly connect prediction error signaling with superficial pyramidal cells and descending predictions with deeper pyramidal populations, though the exact implementation remains an active topic, as we've talked about. Second, computational models inspired by predictive coding do not merely sound elegant, they often reproduce real neural phenomena surprisingly well. These people describe predictive processing as a candidate canonical cortical computation, especially because it explains why neural responses often reflect mismatches between expected and actual input rather than raw stimulus intensity alone. Third, allostasis gives the framework a biological reason for existing. Brain is not just there to model the world for detached contemplation. It regulates a living body. Work on interoception and allostasis frames body regulation as control and forecasting, which naturally fits with predictive accounts of perception and action. And just to be clear, allostasis is a more fundamental theory of the brain if we're going to have one. Where the caution still comes in, the reason this does not automatically make the full predictive processing story settled is that evidence for prediction everywhere is not the same thing as evidence for one exact predictive processing theory everywhere. So prediction can be central without proving all of the following. Right. Okay. All right. Yeah, you know what? This is a good point then. Okay. I think you know what? Okay. Now that we've hashed that out, I do think that I should change the conclusion here to be softer, or at least more precise. Okay. I would like to learn more about the foundations of it, but it seems at most incomplete for failing to account for meditative phenomenology. I think it would be too. Predictive processing is too. It's off the level of abstraction as meditative phenomenology. Like, I don't think predictive processing is a framework of phenomenology. It's lower level than that. So I wouldn't be looking there for any account on meditative phenomenology. like similar to the thing that you had sent or had asked me to look up on Gemini like last week or 2 weeks ago. Like we can't make a connection between the what was it, the Abba Dharma and predictive processing. Like that was not an appropriate connection to make because they're on different levels of abstraction. So even though like an LLM might try to put those together, that they're not on the same level of abstraction. If anything, you want to take the full allostasis view that like Anil Seth talks about and try to make that type of connection, which might leverage a predictive processing view underneath the hood, but it's that isn't the full view. It's kind of more of a free energy principle allostasis view. All right, constructivism. This talks about it. There are key takeaways from Buddhist investigation into phenomenology that have varying levels of compatibility with the theory, but the takeaways I'm referring to are discreteness of processing moments. Predictive processing is also too granular. If we're like when you're looking at discreteness of processing moments, what you're looking for is the thalamocortical network. That's what you should be looking up. That's what you're going to find as what's making that pace of phenomenal moments updating. I literally think that we cannot perceive the world as more granular than that because that is the frequency with which information is distributed and synchronized across the brain. So you couldn't we can't notice anything without information making something become conscious, if that makes sense. So, all right, 2, a functionally specific background state with its own object and interruption dynamics. That one you want to look to interoception, not predictive processing, even though predictive processing is it's a more granular idea in interoception, but all right, and 3, a sequential multi-stage process within a single perceptual episode rather than a simple bidirectional flow. How long is a perceptual episode? Like, I'm guessing many processing moments. And this would still be like a discussion of broad architectural processing and synchrony. A volitional jhana phase where something like conative waiting occurs, and then the mind door process is genuinely distinct from the sense door process. Okay, I don't know what those two would mean. Epistemic differences, I know. Right, but yeah, not just epistemic differences, but in terms of how the brain actually generates phenomenal experience, predictive processing is just not at that level. It's lower level. It's the foundation, kind of, but it's not it's not actually the more fundamental idea here. About 0.1 seconds, a bit higher, maybe on a, okay. All right. I'd soften many neuroscientists, and the brain is fundamentally organized. Okay, this increasingly led many researchers in this tradition, many researchers to a radical conclusion. Prediction error. Okay. Oriented towards minimizing prediction error. What about something like that? How about something innocuous? Is innocuous the word I'm looking for? Like innocuous. Yes. I'm trying to prime it. ChatGPT's actually been pretty good at not letting me get away with anything here. All right, still change 2 things. Many neurosciences is still broader than ideal. I'm gonna just run with it. I don't think I'm not gonna be a non-predictive processing apologist here. Oriented toward is smoother, but it can still sound like the whole brain is one settled goal. Oh, to a... Okay, what if I just said, okay, what if we kept the latter part here, but instead of conclusion, we use something softer. That's really what we want to get rid of here. Conclusion is a little too crazy. Radical hypothesis, proposal, interpretation. How about a radical interpretation? I think we could do better, but it's something closer to that. If I picture this increasingly unified picture led many researchers toward a radical interpretation. And then I'm going to bring back fundamentally. But, okay. Researchers. Oh. Alright, many neuroscientists I feel like is fine, actually, but the brain is fundamentally oriented. Okay. I think I'm running with it. I'm not gonna keep going on this one. All right, what are we at? 23 or something? Oh no, we're way up. We are at 30. 32. Our internal model determines the very repertoire of what is potentially perceivable to us, but I guess we could say what is perceivable to us. Moderate severity, strong Kantian constructivist claim. Uh-oh. There are constraints from sensory systems, body, environment, culture, learning, and task demands. Is that not our internal model? I guess environment, obviously. Determines is too unilateral. So what's the best way to go about this? Our internal model determines, significantly affects the very repertoire of what is perceivable to us. What we could possibly perceive. Oh, that's, oh my gosh. Theoretically, what we could possibly perceive. Our internal model helps shape the repertoire of what we are prepared to perceive in a given context. How about, let's get out of that. The very repertoire of what is perceivable to us. This makes it seem like there's a collection of things that we could possibly perceive. It's therefore, our internal model significantly affects what we could possibly perceive, at least in each moment. At least in each moment, given a certain environmental context. Something like that. Can we fit all this? All right, for number 32. Can we fit all this more nicely? Are we still at 39? Yeah. I don't know, it's going to be hard to cut down, but higher maybe on average. Okay. Interesting. Can you read about it and give your perspective next stream? Probably not. I think this is just kind of out of my wheelhouse. Like, I don't think that's in the scope of either what this channel's about or what I'm interested in generally. Unfortunately. All right, therefore, our internal model helps determine what is perceivable to us in a given moment and context. It needs to be stronger than this. No, what? Softer? I want to go stronger. Sets the conditions? No. What about fundamentally affects? What about fundamentally affects? Helps shape, but is less totalizing than determines. Therefore, our internal model fundamentally affects what is perceivable to us in a given moment and context. In order to perceive a pen, your brain must be equipped with a generative model capable of generating the expected sensory signals of a pen. Amen. Okay, let's keep going. 32. 33. If a top-down prior is overwhelmingly strong, it will completely overwrite the sensory input. Okay, that sounds... There we go. It will... If a top-down prior is overwhelmingly strong or improperly assigned high precision, it can effectively overwrite. Can effectively overwrite the sensory input. This dynamic directly explains why human perception is so notoriously fallible. It tells us why we can often see things that aren't physically there. If a top-down prior is overwhelmingly strong or improperly assigned high precision, it can effectively overwrite the sensory input, resulting in what we normally call a hallucination. For number 33, how about this? Can effectively instead of will completely is good. I would make one small adjustment. Overwhelmingly strong or assigned excessive precision. It can effectively override sensory input. Override sensory input. I like that. Resulting in what we normally call hallucination. Okay. Let's keep going. If the salience network deems, oh, we're getting close to where I said that we could start reading stuff, but maybe I'll just do a half an hour of reading. If the salience network deems, man, we are not even halfway. Deems. Conversely, it explains why we can fail to see things that are physically right in front of us. If the salience network deems a piece of sensory data as irrelevant noise, it turns the gain down to 0. That's not really unambiguous, so we should change that. Inattentional blindness is not literally the salience network setting gain to 0. Multiple, yeah, right. If task demands and intentional systems assign that signal low priority, it may never become available to conscious report. Conversely, it explains why, okay, if the salience network deems, it's not this, it's like doesn't deem a piece of sensory data as relevant, it may never become consciously noticeable. For number 34, what about this? Okay, the grammar, right, if the salience network doesn't, oh, that's my sentence, doesn't deem as relevant is a little awkward. Use deem relevant, doesn't deem relevant. If attention and salience systems do not treat a piece of sensory data as relevant, like a gorilla walking through a basketball game while you are intensely focused on the ball, it may never become consciously noticeable. If you want to keep, okay. That's fine. Like a gorilla walking through a basketball game while you are intensely focused on the ball. Was it a basketball court? While you are intensely focused on... I should have this go over the screen. Okay, gorilla basketball video. Is this a game?
This is a test of...
This isn't even a court. Did she just get bonked? That's great. I feel like this isn't the only one. I guess everyone does this.
The monkey bit.
How many people have gorilla suits? Very nice. Okay. Tyler and the invisible gorilla experiment, which fooled most people. In a famous 1999 study, participants watched a video of people passing a basketball and were asked to count passes. Midway through, a person in a gorilla suit walked through the scene, and half of the participants didn't notice the gorilla. That's 2 months ago. 25 up. Okay. Fun side note, spotting big, obvious gorillas have become somewhat of a running standard / joke in experiments on attention. 83% of radiologists missed a matchbox-sized image of a gorilla inserted into CT lung scans. Fingerprint matching experts mostly missed a giant gorilla overlaid on the fingerprints they were given to examine. Jeez. These people must be descended from Glorpa the alien because my ancestors gave me gorilla-seeing genes. It's right there. I thought he was gonna just dash or something. Bro is slow walking through the show. Keep it low. Don't get it twisted. This is definitely fake. Yeah, I think it literally worked for my entire class when I was in Psych 101 in high school. So I think I can empathize with you know, everyone that's gets got by the gorilla. But okay, walking through a basketball game. Can we change this? Can we make this more? Can we make this more apt to what the videos usually show? Are you about to make an image for me? What is this? Can we make the wording here more apt? Did it see? What is happening? Videos to what the studies usually show. I think video might be it. Yeah. Time to switch to Grok. I mean, I'm actually kind of blown away at the fact that ChatGPT whipped out 80 pointers for this paper. I think that's kind of crazy. And all of these pointers have been pretty good so far. So I'm actually, I don't know, I'm a little taken aback by ChatGPT right now. A person in gorilla stew walking through a basketball game while you're focused on counting passes. Like failing to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through a basketball game while you are busy counting. Okay. We could just say while failing to notice a gorilla walk through a basketball game while you're it's not a basketball game though. I think that's fine. Okay, what are we on? 33, 34? 35. Friston realized. Oh, we're up to the free energy principle. Friston realized that if a biological system's fundamental goal is to minimize prediction errors, how is phase 8 not even halfway through? What happens? Implications on conscious perception? Where does that lead us? Wow. It's all the implications. Crazy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, it just proved a 60-year-old mathematical conjecture the other day. Yeah, I did see that. They did that to themselves, yep. I'm sure they're happy about it, though. Friston realized. Minor severity. This makes the conceptual move sound like one person discovered a settled biological fact. Active inference is a formal framework developed by Friston collaborators. Considered. Okay, that's easy enough. Let's just move on. By physically acting upon the world, you force the incoming sensory data to match your prior expectations. By physically acting on the world, moderate severity, good active inference intuition, but force and prior expectation can imply stubborn denial rather than action guided by policies and expected free energy. You act to, by physically acting on the world, you make, you influence. What was the other part? Thereby annihilating prior expectation to match your expectation. Okay, for number 36, how can we improve this? One of Erdo's problems. That might have been it. I don't quite remember. I heard he had heaps and heaps of those, and not many people even looked at them. That's crazy. Is it something where like we only discovered how important those problems were, like more recently, or are they just like kind of fun problems that we just know about, but no one's even close to solving them, of course, unless you've got AI. Match your expectation and annihilating are a bit too forceful. By physically acting on the world, you change the incoming sensory data so that it better matches your expectation, thereby reducing prediction error. Beautiful. Easy. In neuroscience, this is known as active inference. Can we just say this is known as active inference? All right. What are we at? 36, 37, 36? Yeah. By physically acting upon the world, oh no, we're on 37. From simple physical systems to living organisms. Applying FEP to simple physical systems is controversial and depends on formal assumptions. Even proponents distinguish the mathematical principle from specific biological theories. Friston 2023 treatment calls FEP a normative account and notes its mathematical status is not falsifiable in the ordinary empirical sense, right? From living systems and some formulations, even broader classes of self-organizing systems. I think I'm going to die on this hill. Specialists will notice I'll let specialists notice on that one. A rock persists. A rock persists because its atomic bonds keep it within a relatively stable range of states. What's wrong with that? This risks conflating ordinary physical stability with FEP-style self-maintenance. Rocks do not minimize free energy in the organismic active inference sense. They could. Depends what we mean by active inference. Like, according to the free energy principle, any physical system applies. It just needs to match the criteria that is laid out there. So a rock, as persisting over time, as having these bounds, would fall under the system. And what we would be describing as actually fending off entropy would be merely the physical structure of the rock itself. We would describe whatever the dynamics of, I don't know, electrons and whatnot, whatever's keeping this thing together, would be some sort of operating in response to stimuli in such a way that the system persists. But of course, that's kind of it's kind of out there. So I'm curious if the reason why I want to include that is because that's really what the free energy principle is talking about. But that might be less accessible for people that just want to consider biological life. So that's the issue. Rock remains stable through passive physical structure. Living systems are different because they actively maintain the conditions of their own persistence. That's why I want to say biological life, however, is a far more improbable physical system. To exist as a distinct entity, it must maintain to persist. Persist. How closely do we say persist here? To persist as a distinct entity, it must maintain a strict physical boundary separating its internal state from the surrounding environment. If the internal temperature drops too low or its chemical gradients dissolve, it ceases to be an organism and becomes a puddle of ambient matter. In Friston's framework, maintaining these narrow bounds of surviving can be understood as minimizing surprise, avoiding sensory states that would be highly unlikely if the organism were safely within its viable range. In this sense, a fish expects to be in water. Being out of water is a surprising state. It's statistically surprising. I should just say statistically. To persist over time, a living system must keep itself within a viable range of expected sensory states. Is this not what we just say? Resisting the drift towards disorder by minimizing the surprise that threatens its own organization. Okay, this is redundant. Look at that. 38? Nope, still 39. Okay, Erdos has a bunch of problems. The specific one was this. Okay. I believe it was a proof by exhaustion, which AI would be perfect for. Although if it hallucinates, surely that can't be true. Now I'm confused. Well, it's not like it always hallucinates. There's like a percent chance that it hallucinates, or like I forget what the hallucination scores actually represent. But I'm pretty sure that these mathematical proofs are very easy to verify. They're hard to find, but then they're very easy to verify. So if the AI generates a proof, then you would be able to easily verify it. Like, it's not NP hard or whatever, I don't know, these other things are to determine. I guess these math equations aren't necessarily NP hard, but here it is. All right, let's move on. Minimizing surprise. Severity moderate. Surprise. Oh, is this the same thing? In FEP, predictive processing is technical and often not directly accessible to the organism. It's never accessible to the organism in a strict FEP setting. You later clarify this, but early phrasing risks confusing Shannon surprise, sensory surprise, prediction error, and variational free energy, minimizing the attractable proxy for surprise. So how did early brainless organisms figure out how to minimize? Okay, so for this sentence, can we use something more like unsurvivable states? I don't want to make it verbatim. Hopefully it doesn't go verbatim. Yes, it sounds awkward and non-standard. I'd use non-viable states. Avoid these survival-threatening states. Beautiful. How to avoid these. Look at that. They didn't. Any system that failed to minimize sensory surprises simply dissolved into entropy. They died. It died. The only systems that persisted. Okay. This is a. The only systems that persisted were the ones that randomly developed physical mechanisms to react to these sensory stimuli in ways that kept their boundaries intact. This is the blind, ruthless filter of natural selection at work, the catalyst of evolution. All right. Sick. What do we got next? 38? 40? Homeostasis is the simplest form of active inference. I think I say in this sense. Severity, moderate. Some active inference theorists would accept a broad continuity, but homeostasis and active inference are not identical. Okay, homeostasis. In this sense, homeostasis is, I don't want to say the simplest form, is a simple expression of active inference. Beautiful, right? Right? ChatGPT? For number 40, how about this? It is much better than the simplest form of active inference. Your version... I'd make one small change. Homeostasis can be understood as a simple... Fine. Let's make it less ambiguous. Actively reacting to keep bodily variables within viable bounds. Awesome. 41. Oh, we hit the time. Oh, I was wondering about this earlier. I guess you can't see it actually now. I ask, what is the YouTube video upload option about whether any AI generated content is included for? Is it mandatory? I feel like I've seen many popular YouTube videos that don't show this indicator and obviously use AI generated images. So I think I've kind of decided not to include any AI, and I fortunately have not used any AI in the videos since those early video essays where I just had AI music, but now we just have actual music that I pay for. But I'm just curious what's going on with that. You are seeing a ton of videos with AI generated images that don't have the label. The reason comes down to how YouTube specifically defines the purpose of that tool. Here's a straightforward breakdown of what this option does, when it's required, and why so many creators skip it. What's the disclosure option for? It introduced the altered or synthetic content checkbox in early 2024 purely for transparency and to prevent misinformation. It is designed to let viewers know when they are watching something that looks like a real life event, person, or place, but is actually a deepfake or AI generated. It targets things like voice cloning, making it sound like a real person said something they didn't, digitally altering a face, blah, 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 fabricated events, Is it mandatory? Yes, but only for highly realistic content. If a creator uses AI to make something that could easily trick a viewer into believing it's real life, they must check the box. If a creator consistently uploads realistic, undeclared AI fakes, YouTube can enforce penalties. Awesome. They might apply it themselves, take it down. So why it doesn't have a label? YouTube policy is entirely focused on realism and deception. So, okay, so yeah. So I would like to, like, ideally I would like to use AI image generation to come up with like effective images that go, like, B-roll to go along with the stuff I'm talking about. The problem is I think that disqualifies me from posting this video in certain places. That being said, maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure, but I think I'm going to be safe on this one. Maybe I have an AI version and a non-AI version. If they're checking a trillion things, you can't verify that. Did I get you? Thank you, thank you. Would you disclose that AI helped writing? Oh, in what though? Would I disclose? Oh, in the description? Probably not. Yeah, I think that would just get me in more trouble than it's worth. I think people will find out that, you know, I use AI significantly for figuring out, you know, many different aspects of this writing process, right? Like this has helped me not only learn the material, but then to structure my outline and to iterate on that over and over and over again. Like the amount of prompts that have gone into this video essay could be in the, I don't know, late hundreds at this point. I don't even know. And so, yeah. If someone sees that this thing was helped with AI, I think they might think that I like put a single prompt in and then this thing came out. And that might just like, that would be an AI fallacy. That's actually a pretty fun fallacy to think about, the AI fallacy. It's like a certain form of ad hominem. Would you disclose that AI helped writing? I'll be honest, sometimes a video looks promising early on. I hear some AI speak and I always just instantly close it. Fair enough. Yeah, I really don't like when there's an obvious AI voice talking to me. Like this is like a review of a game or something and there's an AI voice. Like I wouldn't even mind if the AI voice was a little better and it was like, at least there was some fake enthusiasm about the game, but that's never the case. Okay, let's get rid of this. I do think it is the ethical thing to do. Oh, to disclose that it was written. You're saying like that it was written within the description. Yeah, I just don't think that would be pragmatic, and honestly, I don't think it's too hard on my conscience, just given how much time and effort I spend into making sure that everything about this thing is sound. All right, it's not AI generated, it's AI enhanced. Your detail is exactly what the space needs. Thank you. Here are some suggestions for what you can do. What is this? Is this AI? Like your argument seems to be, but I used AI in a smart way. Now my arguments, it's not even like, it's even worse than that. It's that like I can only, you know, I can only operate off my own conscience, and I feel, you know, I'm earning the right for me not to feel guilty in any way. Like that's what I'm doing with all this extra effort. I'm making it so that I can feel comfortable in actually putting this out. And yeah, I'm also pragmatic in the sense that the goal is to get more eyes on this, so I'm not going to try to shoot myself in the foot. Who was that one guy who said he was a bit disappointed in the AI usage on this project? That was pretty funny. It was in the Discord. I have to check that Discord. It's been like a while since I've checked the Discord. Me. Yeah, fair enough. I know for sure though that I could not have made it this far if I did not have the tools that I have at my disposal. This essay is kind of like a culmination of everything I've done on this channel, honestly. Everything that's kind of in that part 1 space. Now, granted, I actually think that the next thing I'm going to do after this video is to then go straight into what are the practical takeaways from all this stuff that we just talked about. Like, you know, we get all these implications on conscious perception, but what are the implications on conscious perception? And that brings us right to our framework of freedom that we should spend more time. What is this? What's going on here? A fake space after the paragraph? Okay, let's just keep going. I don't think anyone wants to hear me read from the start. I think if anything, you guys would want me to read from phase 10, which is finished. But I'm worried that we're going to be editing it, but I don't know. Maybe because I don't think it's going to matter as much. Oh no. There's not much glutamate going on here. And really, glutamate it should not be in the most accessible version of anything I put out. This was a full-on critique, though. Oh yeah, that was in the Discord. This is not your final work, my student. Yeah, this is not my final work. Okay. Do you guys want to have fun? Should we do a little fun? All right. Flag me when something goes awry, all right? Let me know when things don't check out. It's going to be pretty chill, and then it's going to slowly ramp up to the crazy language stuff. We got 7 pages of phase 10. All we've gotten up to now is the idea that this is the part 1 type of idea that what we end up experiencing is subjective. It feels objective. It's contingent on our background, our genetics, our upbringing, what we ate for breakfast, all that stuff. Now we're at the real issue. This is past where the neuroscientists go. Flag. Stop. Okay, get the flags ready. We must now confront a profoundly unsettling implication of everything we've discussed. What each person perceives, what we each perceive, is entirely subjective, fundamentally shaped by our unique genetics, prior experiences, and even the immediate effects of what we ate for breakfast. Our standards of what is true or rational, our visceral feelings of certainty, and our conscious rationalizations are all completely dictated by our individual, unique predictive architectures. Completely dictated is going to be flagged. I know that's coming up. Furthermore, because our internal models are constantly updating through learning, memory, and mere degradation, our perception of the world is constantly shifting, even as the brain forces it to feel perfectly stable. So this is all stuff we talked about in phase 9. This leads us to a terrifying philosophical problem. If every human being is locked inside their own dark skull, generating a completely subjective reality, how can we agree on anything? If all experience is an internally generated hallucination, how do we ever arrive at a shared truth? All right. The answer lies in how social species biologically regulate one another. Every cognitive and affective process we have discussed so far has been driven by a single imperative. An organism must regulate its internal physical state to survive. For social species, this involves predicting the behavior of others. Over hundreds of thousands of years, billions of hominid brains bumped into the same physical world and into each other. To the brain, another human being is simply a highly complex, highly volatile source of sensory stimuli. To minimize expected free energy, the brain must build predictive models of other people. However, unlike static physical objects, the hidden causes driving another person are deeply complex. As neuroscientist Anil Seth notes, the light waves from a physical object originate directly from the object itself, but the sensory signals of another person's mental state must pass through a chain of intermediate stages, facial expressions, gestures, and speech acts, which with each stage creating a massive opportunity for ambiguity and prediction error. To navigate this ambiguity, humans developed mechanisms for theory of mind, the cognitive ability to guess the hidden causes of other people's behaviors, emotions, and intentions. These hidden causes affect both what we consciously perceive and, crucially, how we act. We can think of active inference regarding our social interactions. Just as we move our physical bodies to force the physical world to match our predictions, we act socially to force other people to match our predictions. So this is going to be also flagged, given that it flagged basically the same language previously. We smile not only to express our own pleasure, but to actively change the way our companion is feeling. When we speak, we are actively trying to insert thoughts into another person's mind to bring their internal state in line with our predictive model. So this paragraph I want to kind of flag as we should change the wording slightly here. Now tell this to autistic people. And just like any physical prediction, we validate these social hypotheses empirically. We constantly monitor their facial expressions, vocal tone, and physical behaviors, using this incoming sensory data to continuously modulate our predictions and subsequent actions. Because humans are hypersocial, this interpersonal active inference suggests a degree of reciprocity. My best model of your mental state may include a model of how you are modeling my mental state. I can only understand what is in your mind if I try to understand how you are perceiving the contents of my mind. We perceive ourselves refracted through the minds of others. Okay. We don't need that. We don't need that sentence. Anil Seth highlights a profound evolutionary implication here. The self might necessarily require a social context. If you existed in a universe without any other minds to predict, there would be no need for your brain to model how it is being perceived, and therefore no biological need for it to infer that its experiences belong to a self at all. Through this constant interpersonal collision of generative models, humans evolved alongside the very cultures we created. In evolutionary biology, this is known as the Baldwin effect, which states that learned behaviors can influence the direction of evolution. At the group level, this creates a powerful social feedback. When a group develops a more effective culture, one that allows for better coordinating and hunting, more precise warnings, or stronger social bonds, that group as a whole gains a significant survival advantage. This success creates a new selective pressure within the group. Individuals whose genetic disposition makes them slightly better at learning, processing, and contributing to this cultural system are more likely to thrive and reproduce. Over generations, our biology adapted to our increasingly effective culture, and our culture co-evolved with our biology. Through this lens, how are we doing? Are we still chilling? Through this lens, we can see how broad forms of communication and eventually language emerged as internal biological mechanisms for social allostasis. Language allows isolated brains to explicitly synchronize their generative models so they can cooperate and survive. Explicitly is pretty strong. Neuroscientist Carl Friston and cognitive psychologist Christopher Frith have demonstrated that when you place two predictive brains in dialogue, they inevitably form a coupled dynamic system. Each agent attempts to minimize their own surprise by predicting the other. Over time, the most efficient way to minimize mutual free energy is for both agents to align their internal models, their priors. Thus, we can consider that when we have a conversation with someone, we are aligning our models. This is a little... Is this out of place here? No, this is fine. This is fine. It's a different topic. Though I think this last sentence needs to be rephrased or something. But what does it actually mean to align our models? Because every human brain possesses a unique, constantly shifting neural architecture, two people can never hold the exact same understanding of a concept. Instead, through constant interaction and linguistic signaling, we arrive at pragmatically similar understandings, a synchronization of predictive models that allows two organisms to interact without generating massive, uncomfortable prediction errors for one another. We can think about what pragmatically similar might mean in different contexts. Consider a student answering a question on a test. To get the question right, the student doesn't need to possess the identical understanding as the teacher who wrote the exam. The student's internal model simply needs to be pragmatically similar enough to write the answer that the teacher expects. Intuitively, our shared understandings are multidimensional. We each belong to countless overlapping cultures, families, professions, hobbies, and we maintain pragmatically similar understandings with different populations about thousands of different topics. We do not need to share an identical objective reality to survive. By dynamically interacting, updating our models, and minimizing social prediction errors, we develop pragmatically shared knowledge. This seamless, continuous synchronization allows us to operate seamlessly, ultimately generating the profound metacognitive feeling that a shared objective truth holds us all together. Okay. So far, so good. We're chilling. All right, the collapse of the objective referee, the deeper problem. We must now address a glaring paradox at the heart of this essay. We just spent an hour relying on empirical science, biology, fMRI data, and physics, to prove that we do not directly perceive the physical world. If our internal models are uniquely constructed and all perception is a controlled hallucination, how do we establish a truth that we can share? What is the right interpretation of sensory stimuli? When we look at the immense success of the physical sciences, it seems as though we have found an objective referee, but a closer look at the history of science reveals something much more profound. Oh, I see. That we have found an objective referee. All right, the story. So this is taken right out of part 1 of the document, but shortened. So the story of empirical science is not the story of humans suddenly opening their eyes and seeing the objective universe. It is the story of humans slowly inventing a highly specialized set of cultural norms to enforce shared predictions. For the sake of time, we must walk through a compressed, inevitably reductive version of this history, but its underlying narrative is clear. Ancient cultures globally engaged in sophisticated observation to track the stars and manage agriculture, but this inquiry was deeply embedded within a mythic spiritual framework. For centuries, the impulse to investigate the material world was inseparable from the experience of the observer. An alchemist, for example, was intensely empirical, inventing laboratory glassware and chemical distillation, but an experiment only succeeded if it also carried spiritual significance. The concepts of detached observation did not yet exist. The necessity, this is going to be flagged for sure. All right, a crucial conceptual breakthrough occurred during the Islamic Golden Age with thinkers like Ibn al-Haytham, who pioneered a radical new ideal. To understand a phenomenon, the process must be deliberately designed to exclude the observer's own perceptions and biases. The procedure itself, not the spiritual state of the practitioner, became the guarantor of truth. Over the next centuries, these ideas spread And eventually, during the European scientific revolution, philosophers like Francis Bacon, Descartes, and Galileo formalized them by conceptually separating the subjective thinking mind from the mechanical material world. Nature could be studied as a predictable machine written in the language of mathematics. Notably, this was not a clear break from not a clear break, but a messy, centuries-long process of intellectual negotiation. The very minds that forged these new rules were often still embedded in a spiritual worldview. For example, Isaac Newton, who gave us the mathematical laws of gravity, spent more time secretly studying alchemy and mysticism than the laws of gravity. Okay. But gradually, this empirical method carved out its own distinctive domain of authority, achieving its immense power precisely by limiting its scope entirely to the mechanical, the measurable, and the material. What do you think of the idea that an objective scientific view is only a multitude of subjective views? I think I've brought it up here before. I don't know who came up with it. Thomas Nagel, maybe? Right, I think that's kind of the story I'm telling here. I think, you know, the two things are going on. One, we are negotiating this understanding of the world via communication, and what is actually affecting the trajectory of this seems to be a developing cultural set of norms that people feel, right? People are conditioned on these norms as their parents say that, well, that's not right because blah, blah, blah. And people read and, you know, all these different things affect what you end up thinking to be rational and well evidenced and good reasoning and whatnot. And this develops over a long period of time. So, but at the end of the day, it's really just a bunch of subjective views. Crucially, this evolution of method gradually reshaped the cultural norms of what counted as reasonable in many aspects of life. The new emphasis on empirical evidence, logical consistency, and mathematical precision began to seep into the broader culture, changing the very standards by which beliefs and arguments were judged. In essence, these new meta-rules for science became new cultural ideals for rationality. This in turn affected the subjective perceptions and experiences of individuals. A claim unsupported by evidence began to feel less coherent, less certain. Okay, we could get rid of that. That's not a necessary sentence. In the modern era, this ethos has been institutionalized into a global infrastructure designed to relentlessly minimize shared prediction errors. Peer review was established as a social mechanism for error checking. The principle of falsifiability ensured that models could be tested and broken. Statistics became the formal mathematical language for managing uncertainty, allowing us to state the precise degree of confidence we have in a shared model, allowing scientists... Okay, I feel like this is all extra stuff, and we just said allowing, so... Scientists could say... Not, this is absolutely true, but here is the evidence, and here is the precise degree of confidence we have in this conclusion. Science, therefore, is not a flawless, timeless window into an independent reality. It is a historically developed, highly specialized set of cultural norms and tools to help us systematically understand and reduce the uncertainty of our hidden causes. Ultimately, these exact norms have led us to the robust yet sophisticated models of physics and neuroscience that have fueled this very conversation. All right. So all science is subjective? Yeah, but like, once again, when we say subjective here, we don't mean that negative connotation of like willy-nilly, it just, you know, flies off into nothingness. It's just not a thing, you know. Fairy dust, whatever Matthew McConaughey says. Like, the point here is that the reason why these norms went in the way that they did was because they were incredibly effective for how they allowed us to act on the world. I need to read his book on the topic. It seemed like a deep and far-reaching idea. Fair enough. All right, but this is, I think, where we kind of make sense of that. So this is the real ultimate paradox. Maybe this is a bad way to go about this, because every single subsection it's been like, okay, now the real issue is this. All right, so the paradox of explaining perception. We must now confront the ultimate paradox of this entire essay. We have just used empirical science to prove that we do not directly perceive the physical world. Our only access to reality is our own subjective experience. Therefore, the concepts we have used to explain reality are themselves products of our predictive model. So this is kind of samey as the last subsection, so I got to figure that one out. They are a reflection of our pragmatically shared understandings afforded by a similar education and culture that result in the concept of a physical world that feels entirely independent of and strictly responsible for causing our experience. We are caught in an inescapable recursive loop. To explain how perception works, we must talk about physical processes persisting over time and physical stimuli interacting with our biology. Yet, according to this very framework, our conscious understanding of those concepts is ultimately just an expression of our predictive architecture. We are using our brain's predictive machinery to explain the mechanics of its own predictive machinery. Okay. Should I say this twice here? Many might be tempted to view this recursion as a fatal flaw that disqualifies the entire scientific framework. But if we take the rigorous success of empirical science seriously, we must accept this loop not as a failure, but as the fundamental boundary condition of human epistemology. We cannot step outside our own models to check them against a mind-independent universe. We cannot appeal to some absolute objective judge to determine whether our explanation is right. Ultimately, no assertion about reality escapes the contingency of our culturally influenced experience. The strict physicalist, the idealist, and the dualist are all equally trapped within their own predictive perspectives. When they argue over the true metaphysical nature of reality, they are not going to solve the debate by discovering a truer universal fact. They clash because they each hold an interpretation of reality that feels compelling, affected by their own contingent affective systems. Thus, we must embrace this fundamental ambiguity. Rather than hiding behind claims of absolute objectivity, our only path is to work within the constraints of our shared models. A key lesson we must take from this paradox is a radical reevaluation of and a renewed appreciation for the fundamental role that communication plays in explanation. Because we cannot step outside our individual models, communication is never the simple transfer of universal facts from one brain to another, but instead the pragmatic process of aligning our subjective understandings. Therefore, our choice of language carries massive weight. The words we use act as highly specific sensory stimuli, significantly affecting the cascade of inferences within each listener's generative model. When we attempt to explain perception, our primary goal is to develop an explanation that maximizes this pragmatic similarity. We can consider what would make this explanation effective and compelling. It must be accessible and coherent enough to avoid triggering massive prediction errors, which lead to discomfort, confusion, or outright rejection, yet substantive enough to successfully update the listener's understanding. But this leaves us stranded right back in our fundamental paradox. The framework we have discussed today feels incredibly compelling to me, but what justifies it over any other philosophical stance? How can we determine which explanations are more or less appropriate than others? If we try to evaluate an explanation by relying strictly on what feels reliable, we are entirely at the mercy of our affective biases. If we trust our immediate biological priors, we will undoubtedly embrace direct realism because it intuitively feels like we are looking out of a transparent window. Conversely, if we over-index on the fact that reality is internally generated, we might fall into solipsism, the belief that our own mind is the only thing that truly exists and all physical concepts are mere illusions. Both extremes perfectly encapsulate the subjective trap we find ourselves in. So, as I sit here, locked inside my own subjective architecture, I need something more robust to point me in a direction. I need some heuristic within my own understanding that I can follow, that I can notice and follow. As you may have guessed, we can capitalize on our previous discussion about the cultural norms developed over thousands of years that allow us to effectively reduce uncertainty about our experience of the world. The norms and standards of empirical science and logic. The norms of empirical science and logic are the most reliable mechanism we possess. They've allowed us to split the atom, eradicate diseases, build global communication networks, and, most relevant to our journey today, reliably predict the biological causes of our own conscious perception. To be clear, we cannot treat the products of empirical science as absolute dogma, self-evident truths innately written into the fabric of the universe. Above all else, we can champion the developed standards of methodology that brought those products into existence. These very standards may render our current understanding of physics, neuroscience, and perception as stale and needing to be updated. These very standards may even render themselves as stale and needing to be updated as we continue to discover how we can more effectively evaluate observations and evidence. Collectively, these norms impose an ever-present responsibility, a methodology that must be continually interpreted, practiced, and updated. They demand that we provide evidence, show our work, and remain radically open to falsification, ensuring that even the standards of science remain vulnerable to correction. In return, they provide a shared grounding. Designed to systematically root out affective bias, they are the only heuristic rigorous enough to guide us through the uncertainty inherent in subjective experience. Ultimately, what the norms of empirical science and logic really give us are rules for understanding and communication. They provide the cultural boundaries for how we ought to think and talk about reality, dictating what we are allowed to claim is true, and in a deeper sense, what we are justified in believing. So finally, I propose this. We ought to respect the explanations that are most in line with the standards of empirical science and logic. We should do this not because these explanations map perfectly onto some transcendent absolute truth. Once again, we can never evade the subjectivity of our own perception, nor the ambiguity of our language. Rather, we can choose to respect these explanations because they are the most effective pragmatic tools we possess for reducing ambiguity and finding shared footing. To fully embrace this framework, I must explicitly acknowledge that what I am doing in this essay is merely proposing how we ought to think and talk about perception. I am not making an assertion about the fundamental nature of perception or the world we consciously feel we perceive. My argument comes from my own subjective understanding, yet I have attempted to justify it using what I believe to be rigorous, comprehensive evidence and careful, precise communication. It is simply my attempt at an accessible, intuitive, and scientifically grounded explanation of how we perceive the world. All right, let's close this out with a pragmatic, optimistic conclusion. For centuries, humans have been entranced by the search for absolute ontological certainty, trying to figure out what is objectively real outside of our experience. With this essay, I am attempting to communicate why that pursuit may be misguided. Our contemporary understanding of the brain has completely flipped our relationship with reality, revealing that we are not passively observing the universe through a transparent window. Instead, our brains are locked inside a secluded, dark skull, actively constructing our experience from the inside out. Everything we perceive, every physical object, every concept, every sensation, is a highly practical simulation generated solely to keep us alive. We can finally put to bed the dogmatic belief that human minds can arrive at absolute mind-independent objective certainty. The journey to this realization was long and demanding, but crucially, this deep and unintuitive conclusion would have felt inadequate had we not painstakingly walked through the history and progression that necessitated it. So where does this leave us? I believe that modern philosophy is no longer the search for a final optimal answer. We can now embrace it as the ongoing dynamic process of developing our explanations, leveraging our current phenomenological intuitions, yet grounding them in the ever-evolving standards and products of empirical science and logic. We can never arrive at a final optimal explanation because our collective culture's knowledge, language, and scientific tools will constantly change. We must continually update our explanations accordingly. I hope you enjoyed this inherently imperfect explanation. We will continue to learn and develop these ideas on this channel, so make sure to subscribe and follow to join in on the fun. Massive shout out to all the viewers who helped motivate and develop this script. Profound thank you to Anil Seth and the other reference figures whose work contributed to make this explanation possible. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right. That is it. That's all we got. If anyone has feedback, let me know, either in the Discord or otherwise. And I think I'm going to call it. GG's. I'm going to try, like, fortunately, we haven't gotten to the feedback about Phase 10 yet, so I am excited to make Phase 10 even stronger in its framing, in its language. It's perhaps the most important part, and yeah, we will keep at it. Thank you. Catch you later as well. Thanks for everyone that was chilling today. Thanks for any lurkers, any talkers, and have a good rest of the day.